Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to NFT Bros Podcast. I am Adam Andrews, your host, on with a guest today, S. Lee from Fractal Properties. Why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself to the podcast, give us a brief, 30-second intro of who you are and what you do with Fractal Properties.
Sure. I'm, as Adam said, S. Lee. I've started a couple of companies in crypto, Web3. The very first one was one that used NFTs for real things. So the idea, just the way NFTs represent digital things, they can kind of represent real things as well. So that very first company was kind of broad, and we kind of specifically left it broad because we wanted to see what the market really wanted. And we got a lot of incoming interest from people on the real estate side, which was kind of surprising to us. From there, I spun off and started Fractal Property, which basically takes any existing real property and puts a token to it. And the idea there being it allows the owners of those properties or the users of those properties do a lot more things with it. So it's meant to be kind of this additional layer in the whole kind of real estate stack, as opposed to kind of replacing anything in it.
Very interesting. So when did you start this company, and what do the next 12 to 24 months look like for Fractal? What are you guys doing? What are your plans? And what do you got going on?
Yeah, so we started about a year ago, and we kind of just set up the website, made a marketplace, and the idea was that there's already so many real estate listings out there. We had infinite inventory. So as opposed to kind of any other startup, where it's like a chicken or egg problem, right? You get users and then you get inventory. We kind of had that. So, we put out a marketplace pretty early and pretty quickly. So it was probably the first marketplace I come across where I can go look at real properties and then find the token behind it. And in terms of the next kind of 12, 24 months, I just had somebody kind of join the team. He has a real estate background, and he was like, hey, there's this kind of fractional real estate trend that's going on, with interest rates where it is, properties are getting less affordable. And there's a contingency out there of people that go, hey, look, I can't buy a house anymore. But if I can buy 1/100th of a house, and that house is basically, or a house or apartment is rented out on Airbnb, if you fractionalize it into 1/100th, I could theoretically get the income from 1/100th of that, right? So he wanted to, right now we're kind of focusing on platforms that do that, which is have rental properties. There's a lot of platforms that kind of sell rental properties like that in whole units. And we're working with those platforms to effectively fractionalize it for them. But at the very least, list those properties on our site, so that it kind of steers traffic there. So that takes care of kind of the inventory, problem. And then for any of those platforms that want to say, hey, look, I might sell whole, Airbnb units, if they wanted to fractionalize it and kind of broaden up their investor base, we'd be able to do that for them. So that in the next probably 6 months, we have, on our platform, Roofstock, Awning, Lofty AI, which is a company that actually does tokenize real estate. And we're just going to keep on adding them. There's platforms like Picasso, these timeshare platforms, and that's kind of perfect for fractionalized property, or tokenized fractionalized property. So we plan on bringing those on, and then over time we kind of want to, and maybe this is the 12 to 24 month hope, is that like owners of individual rental properties can start saying, hey, look, like I might be able to get liquidity. Like I had an investment property before, right? Where I was like, hey, I think I can kind of use this money for something else, but if somebody else wanted to buy into this investment property, it's positive cash flow. What I'll do is I would send a portion of like the earnings I have every month, the rent in excess of the mortgage, insurance and all of that. And I can basically send that to the crypto wallets of the people that own that bought into the share. So the hope in the 12 to 24 month period is, individual property owners will start realizing that this is a possibility and start listing their own properties. So it's almost like it would become kind of like an Airbnb, that, kind of, as opposed to a market for fractional usage, which is effectively what Airbnb is, right? Like you rent out a property for 1 or 2 days, you're effectively getting like a, 1/365th of the usage rights of that property. And so instead of strictly for rentals, it would be for, ownership. So there's kind of like a hybrid model that's possible.
Interesting. Okay. Very cool. So, I'm happy to have you on because I used to be in real estate. I did some wholesaling and I've been around and I'm fairly knowledgeable in the, investment side of real estate and understanding all of that. And so, this was an interesting, outreach that I got from you guys. And I was like, I don't know if you've listened to any of our podcasts, but real estate and how it's going to be affected with blockchain technology was one of the first episodes we filmed, if not the first episode I filmed with one of my old team members from a company I run. And we were talking about how it's going to change the landscape of real estate ownership, not only with, fractionalization and the ability to do that and profit sharing. And that's a whole rabbit hole in and of itself, but the on-chain aspect of having a land deed be on-chain and verifiable. Therefore, you never run into problems with losing a land deed. And I think it's a very powerful thing, and having smart contracts interacting with real estate and the whole interaction in and of itself is intriguing, and it's quite the conversation. So I'm happy to have you on specifically to talk about that stuff. So in my mind, the way that your guys' company works is, let's say I'm an investor, I'm into NFTs and crypto. I hold, let's say 50,000 US dollars in Ethereum. Now, you have a property that I can invest $50,000 in. Let's say XYZ Street is for sale, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but are you guys focusing on only the rental aspect and like the investment side of that, or are you looking at land ownership as well, and purchasing these properties with, I guess, crowdsourced funds? Like, are you kind of like a syndicate, an online real estate syndicate that, pulls together resources from other investors throughout the world to purchase properties and fractionalize ownership?
Yes. That's a very good question, because I kind of joke that with my partner that we have an identity crisis. Like when people come on, they're like, okay, is this for crowdfunding? Is this just kind of tokenizing? And why do people want to tokenize it? Like, is it the deed itself? And to kind of answer that, it's interesting to take a step back and think about what property is, right? Like, property really is real estate is unique from say a car, right? In that when you sell a car, there is the physical delivery aspect, right? But when you sell a house, there is no physical delivery. All a house is effectively entries in a database. It's entries in a town database that basically say you have a title. So it kind of makes it perfect for for tokenizing. When you transact in real estate, so let's just say it's not even buying a house, it's renting an apartment, and you have a lease, right? That lease itself it's just a contract, and whether that contract is in paper or it's in digital form, it doesn't matter. It's probably better as a digital form, right? And with tokens, like, you're able to handle the payment. So let's just say you have a lease on your apartment, right? You sign the lease and you write the check and they give you the keys, right? Imagine that could be effectively just done in one step, right? That contract itself is a token or an NFT that says all the things that your lease says. And by sending your ether to it, whatever the dollar amount is, you get that token, and now you have effectively the right to use that property. Now, if you wanted to sublease your property to somebody else, right, you can kind of say, well, maybe that NFT isn't one NFT, maybe it's 365 NFTs, right? So kind of, it's a long-winded way to answer your question. Like, there's the possibility for everything, in the sense that, like, if you wanted to buy a house through an NFT, and that NFT represented the deed, yes, it can, so long as the town recognize that. And if there's some very forward-thinking town that says, hey, look, like, we're going to use the blockchain as a parallel, like, database for our records, but allow people to just interact with that kind of parallel database to pay their taxes, to effectively get their deed. Like, it's a possibility. And we're talking about, this is technology that's available now. It's not like 5-10 years in the future. It's if two parties wanted to transact and they found the blockchain a much easier way than to kind of transact with each other, then that could be done. So whether it be ownership of properties, whether it be rental, and you brought up crowdfunding, which is really interesting, because when, Constitution DAO came up, you had people that were able to use a platform, and awareness to raise $40 million to buy the Constitution. Well, why couldn't you do that to raise $40 million to buy an island, or use $40 million to buy a castle? And that's actually something that the owners could actually use. And if the people who crowdfunded that decided, hey, we want that island to be a rental, like, we want it to be a resort, yeah, that's up to the people who own it. It was the tokens that allowed them to effectively crowdfund that. So what's interesting about kind of doing real estate with tokens and through our platform is the possibilities are limitless. So now anybody can look at a listing of a property that they like and say, hey, look, I think I want to, like, crowdfund this thing. I mean, a friend of mine literally sent me last night, there was a castle in Italy that's available for $2 million. And he was like, oh, like, this would be really interesting if a bunch of us got into it, right? And I go, hey, you could actually do that right now. I'm going to tokenize it and create a crowdfunding project, and then solicit, like, people who want who are interested in this.
Yeah.
And that's the start,
Dude, like, it's so I have these profound thoughts every now and again. Like, I'll tap myself, smoke a little bit, have one profound thought every month or so, right? And
that's always where the profound thoughts are.
Yeah, right. And so real estate was one of them, dude. And I'm really happy that you're on here, because the ability to crowdfund and source people who are interested in the same thing nowadays is so powerful. Like you were saying, I personally would put $5,000 towards that, property in Italy. And if they rent it out, great, and I have a residual income coming in, quarterly or whatever, based on the incomes that are coming in from that property and or other properties, great. Yeah. But personally, I love living like a digital nomad lifestyle. I can work from wherever I want. I need a phone, an internet connection, and my laptop, and I can work from anywhere in the world. And that's freeing, right? But the ability to go travel to a $2 million mansion in Italy and stay, well, that shit's kind of expensive. That might cost $5,000 a night in Italy.
Yes.
But if the ability to purchase this property and then just go visit it for however many days a year that you allow it, there's definitely some sort of algorithm and math formula that can calculate, okay, you put in $5,000 to this $2 million property, you get 1 day a year that you can stay here.
Yep.
Okay, cool. But hey, what if I put in 50 grand? Oh, I can stay here 10 days a year? Oh, now you're onto something. That's really fucking cool. And I have a project that I'll introduce you to. I don't know if you can work together, but it might be a good company to look at what not to do. I won't say any names, and I won't describe them just because it's my own personal opinion of like maybe what not to do. But it'll probably help you get like some sort of perspective on what they did and what they did wrong, because you can go through their Discord and see like the timestamps of when they fucked up and how they responded, and so that you can not do it in the future, right? And
and by the way, that's almost been like every project we've come across, like anything you've seen in the press, like, oh yeah, they put this property up for auction, but they like didn't they had to compete with the regular market. Like this was a broker that wanted to sell a house that did the auction strictly on the blockchain. And I was like, well, why couldn't you just do both? Like whatever people submit as a bid. So we would see, like up to now, everybody who's done this, we've been like, ooh, I could see where you fucked up on that. So I completely hear you on that.
Yeah. And like I literally had this very similar conversation with a friend of mine the other day. He came into town for a meeting, and we went out, had some cigars, had some drinks, and we were just talking, and at the forefront of technology, and like this is the forefront of technology. What you're doing, what I'm doing, like the things that we're doing here, dude, we're just testing. We're just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. And so like the media who doesn't like NFTs, who doesn't understand NFTs, who doesn't like the blockchain technology, doesn't understand tokenizing, they demonize and promote the failures, right? That's pretty much all you see. Unless there's like a really connected person who made a shitload of money and he gets an interview and he's like, oh, I don't know how I did it. I just clicked some buttons when I was high and made fucking $4 million, right? So it's like, those are the very minimal stories of like, oh my God, people got rich using the blockchain. Well, it's like, dude, we are just testing ideas and seeing what works. And like, this is such a new market that we don't understand. But what I like about real estate and what I like about your company and what you guys are doing is real estate's fucking proven, right? And so if you just take the foundational things from real estate and move them onto the blockchain and don't change those, just change the avenues of how you interact between those two parties, like you were saying, a buyer and a seller, right? If you change how they interact, you're going to revolutionize an industry, right? There's so many different things within the real estate sector that can be revolutionized, right? Land deeds, the smart contracts between leases, smart contracts between ownership of assets, and the delivery of the behind the scenes of underwriting a real estate deal, right? There's people literally, like, there's going to be people who listen to this podcast who have no idea what underwriting a real estate deal means at all. That can be 100% on chain. And there's just so many opportunities. So I'm excited to see where you guys go with this. I will say one thing, and then I'll let you talk. But I'm really intrigued by the companies who can focus on one thing. and not get distracted, because there's so many opportunities in real estate that you guys could do, that could pull you in so many different directions. I think it would slow you down. But like crowdsourcing and ownership, or crowdsourcing and then rental and dividend payments to the investors, is like those two things will be massive, absolutely massive. You know, what if you do this for fucking the next 24 months and then Airbnb goes, I want to buy you. What then?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I think the way we describe ourselves, and that is something like, you know, this is something that I talk with my partner about, where I go, like, that'd be great, but here's what's powerful about it. It's almost like it's Craigslist, right? You remember, like, Craig figured it all out. He was just like, hey, look, I'm just going to be the platform in the middle that allowed all these properties. What was it, in the early 90s? That was like, hey, none of this was digital before, but like everybody's transacting property on Craigslist now, and he was just the platform in the middle that allowed both sides to just kind of do things, right? But Craigslist now, actually, like, we describe ourselves as like the potential like Craigslist 3.0 or the Craigslist 2.0 that like handles payments, because like you can have people list their properties and then people find it on the other side. But the payment part was always like, ooh, like you get there and you're like, oh, it's not exactly the thing I was looking at. Like, and so there is this payment portion that, like, here's the beauty of it with blockchain, is like you kind of handle the payments with it. And then kind of on your point on like, oh yeah, if Airbnb acquires us, like, hey, that'd be fantastic. But it actually doesn't stop us from doing what we're doing. And anybody who kind of listens to this podcast and says, hey, look, like, you're right, it's just a technology platform, like, they can spin this up again. Like, I think what's interesting about this is it can't really be owned by anybody. And even if it is like, hey, sure, we get a payday, but like, heck, somebody else, like, you could spin it right back up, right?
It's the idea.
It's the idea. Right. Yeah. And here's something I think people will like underappreciate. And this is like the power of Web3. And to be honest, like, when I started the last company and we had VCs approach us and say, hey, look, like, you know, we're interested in like Web3 companies. And I was just like, I was like, what is Web3? Like, I was doing it, not really kind of understanding, like, you know, the terminology, because there was just this need in my mind. But what's possible with Web3 is that secondary market. So, like, let's just say you book something on Airbnb now, right? And then you decide that, hey, like, that weekend that I booked in Vail, something, like, I can't make it, right? There is somebody else that might like that property and will take it off your hands and take that Airbnb rental off of you. Now, the fact that you booked that weekend with something that's token backed, because you own the token, you own the rights to those days, you could actually relist it in the very same way the primary market effectively listed that, and you can get a cut out of it. And the practical aspect of this, like, there was this story in the news about, you know, there was a couple that booked through a block of rooms through a hotel chain for their wedding, and then the hotel chain canceled it because they didn't realize some big concert was gonna come up, and they canceled it because they realized they can book out those rooms for like 3 times as much, right? And I go, there's a solution. This is a solution for something like that, where if the primary market holder, which is the hotel company, got a share of every resale of that, and the buyer, the booker of the room, hey, I booked the room for $100 and now the market rate is 500. Like, I'll relist that and take in the economics, right?
Yeah,
so, like,
you know, I don't really want to go to Vail that bad. Yeah, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it kind of allows this whole secondary market where everybody's happy. And the interesting thing about like Airbnb was why like they got in trouble with like a lot of regulators and landlords and things like that, was the landlords are just kind of angry that like they didn't get a cut of the sublease, right? As the owner of a property, if you go, hey, like I leased it to you, but like you keep relisting it to somebody else, and somebody buys that from me, and I get a cut of that, maybe I get half, maybe I get like 10%, right? I'm happy because, heck, like I got paid. And so it actually solves the problem that Airbnb has, which is like all the people on that chain, the existing chain that weren't paid before, now you can actually pay it, and it can be paid automatically. So like the possibilities there are like, so that's where I think it's really, what's really powerful about this whole Web3 thing is like kind of that secondary market, right? And I think anybody who is a primary market holder needs to recognize that like, if they don't list their property as they don't tokenize their property now, and then the next guy who owns that property may do it and capture all the economics of it.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. And like this conversation is very familiar to me because on the first episode we talked about the hotel industry slightly as big real estate topic, and then we kind of just flowed to where we're at right now. And it's like, I feel like there's going to be a major pushback from the hotel industry just because they make so much money, not only on like cancellations and then relisting the rooms and being able to book those, if not at a higher rate, like if there's a concert in town, right? And so like, I feel like there's going to be a pushback there, but Web3 and the ability with the secondary market, like you were mentioning, has so many benefits for both parties that by the time the resistance from the hotel industry and the hospitality industry gets big enough for us to be like, damn, like, I don't think this is going to happen, I foresee the consumer side surpassing the hotel industry's like resistance to this, because it's so much more beneficial to the consumer rather than the hotel. Even though it is beneficial to the hotel, yes, hey, maybe you do still get a percentage in the smart contract it's written. You still get a percentage from this cancellation, but you also not only get a percentage of the cancellation, you get a percentage of the room that got rented out to that person who bought it, because you couldn't go to Vail or, whatever. So it's going to be a hurdle, but I'm really excited to see like what happens in that specific side of real estate is the hotel industry. And like, I guess like, honestly, you would probably, you'd consider it ticketing almost, right? And like the ticketing industry in and of itself, and the tokenization of like room ownership and, or, rental is interesting. I was kind of just going on about the hotel industry and the ability for like ticketing and whatnot. And I was close to wrapping up my statement, so we'll just wrap it up. For the listeners who are confused right now, we lost connection somehow on my podcast recording software. Honestly, I probably won't even put this in, but I'll probably have the editor take it out and figure out some sort of nice transition. We might just put a sponsorship right in between where we left off and where we're starting. So, I mean, ticketing, man, go ahead. Like, that was kind of just where I left off.
I mean, when you talked about like the hotel industry and like, I'll get resistance there. In a way, like Airbnb has fought that fight for us, right? Like right now, if I travel anywhere, like I'm actually probably looking at Airbnb before I look up like the hotel industry. And in a way, it's almost like what we have is kind of disruptive to the Airbnb industry, but like it also could work with it. And that's why I think it's like important for people to think about adoption of like Web3 and NFT tech is like, there's really the possibility of working in parallel with them as opposed to replacing them. And like every time I see anybody who like takes real life art and burns it and turns it into an NFT, it like almost brings a tear to my eye. Like, damn it, you guys didn't get it. Like, you can have something in the real world and something in the digital world as well. Like, they could work with each other. Like,
and
it
they
doesn't
represent the same thing.
And they represent the same thing. It's almost like baseball cards and Top Shots, right? Like,
yes.
Like, you could have the baseball card, but you can have the digital representation of the baseball card. And like, that actually works out better. Like, don't go and burn that baseball card. Just have the digital representation represent the physical thing. Cause the cool thing on the digital part is like, it's a pain in the ass to sell baseball cards. Like, I collected baseball cards as a kid, and like, it was worth something, but like sending it in, grading it, all of that, like, it just didn't make any sense. Right. Yeah. But like, if baseball cards worked like a stock market, right, and people were just trading like the digital thing, the value there is so much higher. It almost becomes a stock. And so I guess in a way, like with that Airbnb analogy, like working with Airbnb is like, what do they take? Like 10% right now? If they used like Web3 tech to basically say, hey, every single listing that we have on Airbnb right now, we create a token for it that allows people effectively, when they book that Airbnb rental, to get that token. And maybe we don't even send it to the user. Maybe we just effectively vault it or take it in custody and allow that person to now resell it. The moment you book an Airbnb and you say, hey, you booked it for $200 a night, let me ask you, what would you rebook it at? What would you sell it at? And you go, look, take it off of me for $250 a night. If somebody pays $250 a night, cool. I made $50. Like, I lost nothing. Fantastic, right? They could do that. They could literally do that tomorrow. And they could do it in a way that actually doesn't compete with how they operate right now.
Airbnb could tokenize their ownership of these stays without the end consumer even fucking knowing.
Yep.
You can do it in the back end to where your front end user who has absolutely no fucking idea what's going on in the Web3 space just interacted with Web3 and used it because of the back end and how it's built. Just like Starbucks is doing their stamps fucking NFT program thingamajig, Airbnb could do the same thing. You know, you come on to Airbnb,
the user,
you don't need to change your platform at all. You have the same exact booking experience, that front end UI, it's beautiful. But as soon as you click that purchase option, instead of you just sending money to Airbnb in the back end, you're interacting with a smart contract in which you get Airbnb token or whatever. And it's this token and it's the ownership of this 5-day window at Vail Resorts, right? And you own that now. You don't know that, but you get a pop-up that says, hey, instead of us just taking a big fat cancellation fee, we're introducing the ability to resell your stay, right? So if anything comes up, and it's just, I mean, dude, this could be in a nice whiteboard type video, right? And Airbnb just goes, hey, if anything comes up with your stay and you need to cancel and or, you know, try and get a refund for your stay, instead of that, you can just relist it. You can relist it for more or less than what, you know, you paid. And there can be requirements, right? You can't list 10% lower or whatever, right? Or 58% higher, or, you know, whatever their calculations are, right? But you can make or get some more money back than you would just canceling with the cancellation fee. I think platform adoption at that point would put them way, way ahead of like anybody who's trying to build this now. Airbnb has like for this exact thing has a massive, massive opportunity in the space to make waves. If, I mean, they already are, you know, just even more so, right? And become even bigger.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about kind of when you book that Airbnb and they sent that confirmation to your email, it's almost like, well, that's almost my receipt for the transaction, right? And if they go, hey, if you include your crypto wallet address, we send that receipt as an NFT so that receipt is in your wallet. And if you wanted to relist that, sure, like we relist it, because actually as an NFT, the moment that it's listed, it can show up. It shows up on every NFT platform, because all the NFT platforms are doing are they're looking onto the blockchain, right? So OpenSea is like your Airbnb stay. Once that NFT or that confirmation receipt is printed on the blockchain, like it's available on OpenSea, and people could see, hey, that block of five days is now listed.
Yeah,
was purchased for this much.
And I want to riff off this because I think this idea is really, really cool. I honestly might just clip this portion and email it to like marketing at Airbnb or something, and just like and just to send it to him, because I think this idea is super fucking cool. So, okay, to riff off of what you were saying, right? Let's say you go on Airbnb and you book a stay, 5 days in Vail. We'll just do that. And it's funny that you picked Vail because I'm going to Vail in January. And so let's say, all right, you book this stay on Airbnb. It's 5 days in Vail. You now, throughout the checkout process, whether you paid with crypto or fiat, you input your wallet address. You get that emailed receipt as an NFT. It's now in your crypto wallet. It's on OpenSea. Now, leading up to the stay, up to literally probably, you can write it in the smart contract, 24 hours prior to the stay, you can't sell this anymore, right? Okay, so you can sell it for more or less to get out of it instead of paying a cancellation fee. That's benefit one for the consumer. Benefit one for Airbnb is to get a portion of that resale again, right? And then now that stay happens and you send your customer an email saying, hey, I see you do have a crypto wallet, and the NFT that we gave you, it never expires. It's going to stay in your wallet. Feel free to upload a picture from your trip here, and it will update the metadata as the NFT onto the blockchain, right? Now you have a memory. You have it tied to Airbnb, right? Airbnb is now interacting with you as a consumer saying, hey, tie your brand loyalty to us even more with uploading a picture from your trip to the blockchain, right? Boom. Now you have a picture in Vail at the top of a ski resort with your girlfriend, right? Or your family. Okay? Follow. Just this is where the thought goes profound, right?
Love it.
So now your consumer and your customer from Airbnb has a memory on the blockchain from this event, right? This NFT portfolios are going to become Instagram feeds. I fucking mark my words. That's going to happen. And people are going to fucking pay attention, when they ask, oh, hey, what's your Instagram? They're going to be like, yo, what's your NFT portfolio tracker fucking username or whatever, right? And they're going to be able to see what you've done and the experiences at Airbnb that you've had. Therefore, you get the exposure to the knowledge, like you get the exposure to their friends and the word of mouth of, oh my God, you went to Vail on this day. That looks so fun. And now there's a way to verify that people do travel to these locations. Maybe a person did purchase this Lamborghini or this home, and they're not faking ownership of it, like by renting Lamborghinis and saying, oh, I live this lavish lifestyle, right? There's scam prevention and shit like that. But to kind of come back to the Airbnb thing is now you have a knowledge base of a consumer who wants to visit Vail and has in the past. You already had this consumer data taken, but now what if you, based on that Vail ownership, you now get a 5% discount by booking the same weekend in the next year. And it's available as an NFT, and you can claim it, and it's in your smart contract. It's in the metadata for X amount of days, right? And so you can have these tiny miniature flash sales without showing that you're trying to get discounts and trying to grow revenue, and maybe it's scaring people because they're public investors from Airbnb, but it's you can give these little micro discounts to people and continue growing revenue sustainably with the customer base and knowledge that right? Maybe it was a one-off business trip to Vail, and I probably won't go again ever. But how do you know that? You don't unless you offer it, right? And if you offer it enough times, let's say they travel 10 times in a year and you see a consistent trend in where they're going, you can offer special discounts or offer to upgrade to another different service that they offer, whatever it is. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. There's just a fucking rabbit hole that you could go down that I pretty much kind of did.
Well, riffing off of that, because I love going down rabbit holes. But for for the property owner that listed their Airbnb, if that guest there is now taking pictures of it and effectively enhancing their listing, right? Like that's a positive to the property owner. Like that's an updated picture. Cause you have Airbnbs that, where the pictures were probably listed and it's been, Airbnb for 10 years, but what the pictures there are like, it's from 10 years ago and probably don't represent the property anymore, right? Now you're allowing your guests to actually contribute to what the listing is, like enriching the history and the value of it. And actually, like as a practical matter, like anybody who's looking up this Airbnb can now just look at all the stays and all the pictures that were there. Like it's almost like a tool for like Airbnb and the property owner to let the people who stay there kind of bring value to the listing. So like the possibilities there are like fantastic as almost like a management tool.
Just real quick to riff off of this, I like what you're saying is coming back to like the hotel industry. What if that idea, you could pay someone to come and take really nice pictures for your Airbnb, but also stay there and you paid them via a free stay. Hey, I got a new Airbnb in Colorado. I'm putting it on Airbnb and I want a photographer specifically to come to this house. You can stay here for free. It doesn't really cost you anything, right? As an owner, maybe a cleaning fee. Yeah. But in return, you upload on-chain images of the place. And now we have on-chain images of the place on this day, right? And then, hey, maybe you invite influencers and pay influencers to come to the property. Something similar to like a Joshua Tree residence, right? There's several Joshua Tree Airbnbs that are super, super popular in the entire world, right? Well, what better way to popularize your own property than get influencers to come and stay and talk about them, right? And you offer it for free. Maybe you pay them, whatever, but you get that content back, right? You get those images, you get those videos. The possibilities are just like ridiculously endless. It's just figuring out how to do it in code, right? It's just coding the idea into existence. That's the biggest hurdle.
And the thing with blockchain is like it just needs to be coded once. In a way, like there was our original smart contract. We actually looked at what CryptoPunks did, and was like, hey, copy and paste that thing, modify it for like our purposes, and then that smart contract is actually available to anybody who looks at what we do. So like, to that effect, the work there, it just takes one person to do it and do it right. And then you kind of also thinking about like the discount thing. Like if you're an Airbnb owner and you had certain people that stayed were fantastic, right? And like you want to extend to them a discount. Imagine there was that possibility, right? Like in the Airbnb management tool there, it looks at all your stays and all of that. And you're like, you know what? To that particular guy, because he was awesome. He left the place like, left me flowers, like it was spotless, all of that. If that guy wants to repurchase and rebook again, it's a 50% off. They were awesome, like that's possible. And what I love about kind of like the fact that like this blockchain tech and you have a lot of naysayers about it that kind of go, hey, like it hasn't been used for anything useful and all of that. Like I get it. And in a way, I feel the same thing. Like there's a lot of snake oil like dealers out there. But what I like about it is kind of like the underlying tech. And I think that's the value that's like kind of missed was like in this whole frothy NFT stuff, people were thinking about price speculation, but they weren't thinking about it as a tool. Like this is the new AWS with payments attached to it. And companies got to see the value of that,
I tell people this in conversations similar to this of naysayers of NFTs and or people who are just like genuinely interested in asking me about the technology, because I think I deeply understand how it can affect different industries. Because I understand the technology in the back end, right? I can't code it, but I understand how it works and the functionality.
That's the hardest part sometimes.
Exactly. And I think our biggest hurdle in Web3 and to onboard more people into Web3 is not to onboard people into Web3. It's to bring Web3 to Web2 users in a manner that they don't know they're using Web3 technology, because it's too hard to explain to somebody how the shit works in the back end. They just want to, they don't give a fuck how the coffee maker works at Starbucks. They just want their fucking coffee, right?
Yeah.
And they don't care how the back end of Airbnb works. They just want to fucking stay at Airbnb. They don't care how the internal systems within the government and the public work. They just want people to know, hey, I own this fucking house, right? They don't care about the back end. As soon as the marketing flips and we can market to the Web2 consumer that, hey, this is just a really, really, really beneficial thing that is coming to the market. And it so happens that it's using Web3 technology to do it because that's the only fucking way to do it, unless you build an insanely complicated system in the back end. Why would you do that when you could just use blockchain? It's the tech's already built. And so doing what Starbucks is doing, right, with their stamps program, an Airbnb token, they don't have to know that it's an Airbnb token. It can just be, I don't fucking know, a coupon, right? You could call it an Airbnb coupon and you fucking, like, it's your digital stay or whatever it is. It's just like plane tickets now. Like, you could do the same shit with plane tickets. Rather, government regulation with that would be much, much, much higher.
I mean, I describe the NFT as like a digital receipt. And I think people need to think of it like that, you know?
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a question that I just wrote down that I want to start asking every single guest. We're going to start formatting this podcast in a way where I do an intro, you intro yourself, and then I ask you, please explain to me in your own words what an NFT is.
I like it.
And so to you, it's a digital coupon, is what you're saying? Or digital receipt?
It's a digital receipt or a contract. And so, thinking about it in terms of real estate, it makes more sense as a contract. Literally, you only transact real estate with a contract. There's no physical delivery. And think about this as the future. Like, somebody shows up at an Airbnb and they hold up their phone to the door, and because your wallet has the NFT, it has the code to unlock the door, right? And think about like the hotel industry in a way. Like, you can almost eliminate every person who works in the hotel industry if you could automate these aspects of like, oh, I'm going to check in. Like, give me the key. Here's payment, right? Like, you've taken care of all that. You've taken care of giving them the key to the door. The only thing you haven't really taken care of is like the cleaning aspect after. And if you can kind of hold people, if this is almost like an accountability measure, that's like, hey, look, it costs $100 a night, but if you trash the room, it costs $500. And the next person who came in and unlocked the door saw that the room was completely trashed, right? Like, your charge, your cost is now $500. There's kind of like this ability to take out a lot of the value that was lost in this whole system from like the 10 people that are involved that don't need to be involved anymore, and that translates to the consumer. Cause there's a part of me that's kind of like, okay, well, if you kind of turn all these things into stocks, it just makes it more expensive. And the average person, now you've made housing a little harder to reach, right? But I'm like, kind of not. The reason housing is expensive is all the middlemen, all the inefficiencies that people had to pay into. Like, you're paying 30 people for like one property transaction. If you take all of those out and leave the economics to the owner and the person who uses that, like, that could be a lot cheaper for the person who uses it, Yep, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head with that analogy and explanation. And I have an interesting way of
explaining to people what an NFT is. And I'd like your feedback on my explanation of it, because
Okay, love this.
this is how I explain what an NFT is, right? So are you aware of what Costco is? Costco
Yeah.
Wholesale, the store? Okay,
Costco,
right. So
yeah.
you have a Costco membership card. Now, you get to come into Costco, you get the cheap gas, you get the good deals, you get the cheapest alcohol, the cheapest electronics, all of this stuff, right? All of these benefits you get by holding a Costco card, right? You got that Costco card in your wallet, right? You're so proud to fucking present that when you come to the store because you own a Costco membership, okay? All a Costco membership is it's a subscription to come into a store, right? And so if you just turn that subscription digital, there's already Apple Wallet that I can put my plane tickets on and my credit cards on. Why can't I just update that wallet digitally with my ID and my Costco card? So that when I walk into Costco, now I just scan in at the door with a QR code that's inside of my wallet. That is my Costco membership, right? It's got my picture, and you just walk in and you get all the benefits. Costco could change their membership card to an NFT and it would do the exact same thing. And so when I explain NFTs to someone, I explain it as you're buying a membership access token, right? That Costco membership is literally just a card that gets you access somewhere, right? So do NFTs, whether it be access to a property or access to a digital image or access to a physical location. It's all the same. And
Yep.
Like you said, a digital receipt. It is just telling somebody else that, hey, I purchased this, or hey, I own this, or hey, I have access to this for this amount of days. And it's just a digital version of it, right? And so
Yep.
that's how I explain NFTs to somebody who's new or who
like
has
a
no
membership.
idea. Yeah, like a membership.
Yeah, I find myself like a little kind of torn in like how I explain it, and I kind of like the digital receipt one, in the sense that like it's fundamentally what it is it's basically a way for a rights owner or a rights seller to record their kind of like relationship or transaction with a rights buyer, right?
Yeah,
so like
that interaction, a digital receipt. Yeah.
So yeah, so like whether it be a membership card, whether it be a ticket, whether it be any of these, all it's saying is, hey, I as the service provider, if you're a company, right? If the seller is a company, they're generating, when somebody buys something from them, they get that thing and the company sends them back a receipt, some kind of confirmation of, right? And that's effectively what a ticket is, right? It's effectively like what you say a membership card is, right? Like I've filled out my Costco like membership form, and with that interaction, I now get a card and there's a unique ID to it, right? It's just, here's the physical card, but it could be a digital card. And so I kind of say like it's almost a way just to track between two parties who's purchased or interacted with you. And so, yeah, that's, I guess there's no one analogy. It's all of those. And the right answer, mate, to explain it, like, I rack my mind on this. Like, literally, I've gone through so many iterations with people. I'm like, ooh, did the digital receipt example work? They're like, yeah, that worked.
Right.
But like the digital contract, did that work? Ooh, that kind of didn't hit quite as well. But in real estate, it kind of hits just fine.
Absolutely. Right. And it's, I find that you have to understand who you're explaining the technology to before you explain it. Because if I explain to somebody who doesn't understand like an on-chain contractual membership and or just like a transactional thing in business, right? Like let's say it's somebody who doesn't understand how business works and like the inner workings. I'll just explain it as a Costco membership, right? Whereas the digital receipt response to somebody who, let's say they're a software engineer, would make way more sense. Even though they may not be involved in Web3, they understand how to code, they understand the interactions between computers, right? It's inputs and outputs, right? And that's exactly what you're getting on the blockchain, right? And then it mitigates the need for accounting, right? You know, you can have your private ledger and you can have your on-chain public ledger of transactions, right? And so somebody can go and see like, oh, did my transaction go through this for this, right? Or oops, did it fail? Because why did it fail? And then you see insufficient funds. Oh, I used the wrong wallet to purchase this. Let me go back and switch, right? It's the same with like credit card technology. It's an input and an output, right? It's systems talking to each other.
Yep.
And so, I mean, I find it hard to have one explanation.
It is, and here's one where I kind of wish there was actually somebody who's done this early on when NFTs of like digital art were at its peak, right? And people were like, hey, I can copy and paste like digital art. Like, why would I pay, $100,000 for like this picture of an ape, right? Like, here, copy and paste. Now I get to enjoy it. And I think the industry's response was like, not great. Because they couldn't answer that, right? And my analogy to it was like, as a receipt, if you think of it as a receipt, just, you go to, let's just say Bloomingdale's and you buy a shirt, right? And they give you a receipt. And that receipt could have the picture of the shirt, right? Like it could have a description of the shirt, but it's not the shirt. And like here's the thing that people were kind of missing about like the NFTs and digital art, right? Was like they were like, well, it's a picture. You're like, no, it's not a picture. It's a receipt. The receipt can actually have an image that looks exactly like the real thing, right? And they go, well, then what's the point of having the receipt? Right? And I go, let's just say at Bloomingdale's, you buy 10 shirts and you get one for free, right? There's a value in the receipt to the extent that the service provider extended that to the receipt holders, right? And this is a way for Bloomingdale's to track the people who bought 10 shirts, right? So there's a value to that receipt that's completely distinct from the object itself, right? And the value on something like that is like, what that allows Bloomingdale's to now do is now they can actually track all of their customers and what like that receipt, like it has inherent rights to it because it allowed the service provider like to know who the customer is. It had like value in the sense that like that receipt is worth 1/10 of a shirt. Like right. No matter what you did with the shirt, because if I have 10 of these receipts, I can go to the service provider and say, hey, look, now you owe me a shirt, right? And that's the important piece. So like in these digital assets, like when you bought a digital asset, it wasn't really in the digital asset that you bought, but in the tracking of the creator of that digital asset, like who its customers are, and therefore extend rights to them.
Yes,
right.
It's a transaction of ownership, right? And it's a digital receipt. I love that. And like so, it's funny you bring up like merchandise in and of itself. I think there's huge brands, Nike, Adidas, right? They're coming into this space and they're testing things and they're trying to figure it out. And in my mind, they're probably having a lot of these similar types of conversations within their companies of just brainstorming. It's like, how can we use this technology to further benefit our consumers so that they stay loyal to our brand for longer, right? How do you increase that customer lifetime value? And, we're doing an on-chain digital whiskey NFT, right? And I see you're smiling. There's so many opportunities here to reward the consumer at a later date for purchasing our first drop of an NFT. and we're bringing Web 2.5 to it. We're allowing credit carders to mint. We're allowing people with only emails to mint because we want to bring Web 3 technology into a traditionally Web 2 space. And this company isn't, something that like, oh, I really wanted to start a whiskey company because that's my number one passion in life. And like, it finally intersected with NFTs, right? It's not. That's not it. But what it allows us to do is come into the industry before somebody big like Nike or Adidas or Jack Daniels or, Johnny Walker come into the space and do something huge. We come in, do it, prove it to the consumer. Therefore, they're now expecting it from the other people in the industry who are big, right? Because as soon as these small, really well-ran, clothing brands or whiskey companies begin delivering to their consumer a really, really high-end experience that's fast because it's using blockchain technology, but you can not only reward the future user and or purchaser of the NFT, now there's that interaction of being able to reward you with an airdrop. How do you track that data, right? And my friend, I'll let you take over here in a second. My friend, he was on, I think the episode prior to this, or 2 episodes ago. It's the last one that we put out. He is making a no-code Web3 SaaS platform for marketers and enterprises to be able to interact with their consumers on a higher level and be able to track that data. I probably butchered it. I'm sorry if you're listening to this, Jonathan, but that's what they're doing, right? And they're making it a very, very easy user experience for the marketers to show to the enterprise, like to show to their enterprise, employers, like, hey, we can reward our users using blockchain technology in a really simple way using this platform. And then we don't have to show them that it's blockchain technology because they have a Google sign in on their page, right? And now their customer can just go sign in with Google and it's connected to their Gucci account, right?
Yep.
And so it's really interesting what they're doing and the ability to develop something very unique on the blockchain.
So maybe this is almost even an episode that like now, because we're outside property a bit, but it also goes back to like when I first started the NFT for real things. Like we thought about like physical things, right? And there was this, it's interesting you brought up the alcohol because that was my one example of where a fine alcohol manufacturer is leaving so much value on the table, right? So, wines, like there are people who collect wines, right? That go, hey man, I bought this like reserve wine. It's $1,000 like wine. It was sent to me, but I'm not going to drink it. And now I need to store it, right? Now for the manufacturer of that wine, why wouldn't they create a product that allows at the point of sale? So let's just say they have an e-commerce site that they go, hey, we have a case, 100 of these wines and they're $5,000 each and you can buy them with a credit card right now and we'll ship it to you, right? Well, why wouldn't you leave it as an option to the guy who buys it for $5,000 to do a vaulting fee that says, hey, look, I'm buying this and saving this for a special occasion. Like maybe like, an anniversary is coming up and like, I actually don't want to store it with you. And like, hey, maybe I might give this as a gift to somebody, right? Like, and you would send it to them. So for like all primary market creators, they have the ability to own the secondary market now. Because I think it's it's nuts that like, I'll use like Robert Mondavi as like a, one, because they actually had a like e-commerce site, right? And I was like, Robert Mondavi as a winery is leaving so much money on the table because when they sell these limited edition things that goes to someone, that goes to the customers, on every resale there, like over the years, it becomes more expensive, right? They're leaving money on the table. And they would be able to capture it so well if they, within that e-commerce tab, just had the ability to create the secondary market just right then and there, right?
Yes.
Like they can almost like say, hey, look, you can buy this, this limited, one in like the 100 batch, reserve wine, but we store it for you. But as the buyer of it, this is going to appreciate. We're going to facilitate that secondary market for you.
Absolutely.
You buy it, we list it on our site. Like you bought it for $5,000. What would you sell it at? Right.
Right.
And if they would be able to process it for them.
It's what BlockBar is doing.
Yeah.
BlockBar. It's the ability to purchase and store high-end liquors and spirits and transact. I don't know if they have a marketplace yet, but to be quite honest, BlockBar, if you don't have a marketplace that you can just go and resale the special edition Johnny Walker or Robert Mondavi 100-year anniversary bottle, you're fucking completely missing the point of being in Web3 and using the technology. You should really talk to me. We'll get you set up with a marketplace. I have people that I can connect you with to build you a marketplace. But like, yes, that's like a perfect use case, right? High-end spirits and whiskeys, and just them in general, right? And the ability to reward a consumer. And you did say we are getting off the topic of real estate a little bit, but we're still on the blockchain tech talk and the NFT subject. And so, like, I mean, hey, let's just keep the conversation going and see where it goes. The listeners, you guys know, like, I don't script my podcasts. I don't usually come with a bunch of like set questions. That's not the format. This is like an open format, just discussion about NFTs and technology. And personally, I feel like it'll help onboard more people into Web3 in a safe manner because they're getting so many different perspectives. Maybe they didn't understand my Costco membership, explanation of an NFT, but now that I spoke to you, they understand a digital receipt, right? And it's like, oh, now I understand technology. Okay, you changed one person's mind. Now they're going to go change another, and it's a chain effect, right? Into helping Web3 grow as a whole. So if you're listening to this, thank you. Just tell somebody about it. Like, help us grow, help us introduce a really useful technology to the world to help save time and be efficient and, reward consumers, I guess.
Well, I'll speak to, there's one thing that I think everybody will resonate with. If you're in a business and you produce things, right? You want to make more money. Do you know at the peak of the NFT bubble, what the digital version was trading at versus the physical version? It was 100 times more. Meaning, when Topps had baseball cards, they print out the baseball cards and they were allowing people to buy baseball cards, which is, basically just a picture, on cardboard. They were selling them at $1 each. The NFT version of that same exact card was trading for $100. 100 times more.
I love having these types of conversations, and I think it feeds back into what I was saying is like these conversations, when they're publicized like this, help affect more people and bring more people in. I'm not saying bring them into Web3, but changing their perspective and giving them an understanding, right? Because like the way that you or I explain an NFT on this podcast, it may not be like, a Web3 enthusiast is going to listen to it more than likely than someone who's not, right? But the way that we just explained what NFTs are, maybe they had never heard that before, and now they get to explain to somebody, like let's say their uncle, and they now explain NFT technology to their uncle in a way that he understands how to use it, and then he goes, oh shit, maybe my venture fund that I run should look into Web3 because now I understand this technology. Right now, oh, the Costco membership analogy, oh, the digital receipt analogy, that really makes sense to me. And then it just sparks a thought. They're like, can we do this? and they asked the question, can this be done with blockchain? Yes, more than likely. Like, there's some crazy complex things out there that are happening, but really the question just is, how can you use blockchain in your business to be more efficient and increase your customer experience and grow that customer experience, right? And I think that conversation is quite endless, and because it can be used so differently across different spaces and companies, right?
Yeah. And in a way, I actually kind of feel that this is the only medium for it to happen. So like in our original website, we tried to publish this stuff, but like it ends up being this like long prose that like, it loses a lot of people, right? And I think the speed of something like this, like, I think this is the best medium to do it. And it does require this kind of back and forth, right? So like, I applaud you for doing this. Like, I like, seriously, like even other mediums, like if there was an explainer video or something, like it still wouldn't do it justice because there's a little bit that's like marketing in that, right? And I think, the point that where we left off was I was saying that, and the background for this was we were talking to a company that does that does records. And they were saying that like, it was like a crowdfunding platform. It allowed like an emerging artist to like print 100 vinyls, and their uncle would be the one that subscribes. And then like, if it gets sold, it gets printed as a record. And it came up when we were doing our research, and he was just like, what about the economic value of doing the digital version? And I was like, I'll try to find something, right? So I looked at Topps in the baseball cards, and I was like, holy shit. I didn't even know this was the case. The digital version was selling for 100 times the physical version. So Topps, as a baseball card manufacturer, in theory, could have made 100 times their revenue, made probably 99 times their earnings if they had leaned into it and done it the right way. And when he asked me, he was like, how much of it's hype? How much of it is liquidity and the ability to easily transact, right? Because the baseball card thing, right? It might be worth $10 on Beckett, but it's going to cost me $20 to get it graded, sent, all the stuff. I have to show up at a card show. Some collector needs to come up, find it, and sell it. And he was like, how much of that do you think is purely because of ease of trading, because it's digital? And I was like, it's probably not 100 times, but even if maybe it's 10 times, and even if it was only 2 times, right? That's a strong economic argument for anybody who produces anything of value. Again, if you're a wine, if you're Robert Mondavi and you have this special reserve thing that you're selling for $1,000, and you have 100 bottles of it, and it's $100,000, right? Now imagine if you just implemented this tech, you could sell it for $200,000. Your profit margins on that have gone up astronomically because you probably spent $99,000 to produce it, right? But now you can make, instead of $1,000 profit, you make $101,000 profit. And this is all because you embrace the digital aspect of this, and a lot of people who are buying this aren't really buying it like to drink. They bought it to collect.
Right. And I think there's a massive opportunity there for brands to come into. I think there's a massive opportunity just in general for like a company that delivers a physical good to come into the NFT market and really make waves within their own customer base and grow their business because of the ability to do these things on the blockchain and ask for more money, right? Right? We're asking for more money because the technology that we built with has these things that benefit you more, right? What bottle of whiskey do you know that you can purchase that will get you access to private events and cigar and whiskey lounges all throughout the world?
Yep.
You don't.
Yeah.
We do. right? We're working on that. The ability to access a high-end whiskey or cigar lounge who, like, let's say it's just a club and it's only members of the club. Well, now you have 2,222 bottles who represent ownership of that club and can visit on a, however many times a year basis, right? Whatever we work out. The ability to impact your consumer, and I'm wrapping this back to your question of, and the question you answered of, like, how much of it is value created on the digital side of things, right? Because the alcohol in here, that's your benefit, right? That's the physical benefit. Sure, it's got some nice branding, it looks nice on the shelf. Maybe that's why you did it, right? To collect, to go stick by your bookshelf or in your in the centerpiece of your bar, right? Maybe that's why you bought a bottle, or you spent that $100,000 on a bottle from Robert Mondavi because only 1,000 exist, right? People, that's the exclusivity factor that a lot of people don't understand about Bored Ape Yacht Club, about the other crazy art projects, but they'll go and spend $500 on a bottle of whiskey that does nothing but look nice, right? That's why people buy designer clothes and crazy watches, right? It's status. And go ahead.
But here's the more tangible value, I think. So who's the manufacturer of that? Who's the distiller of that whiskey?
It's a place in Chicago called Mid Oaks Distillery.
Mid Oaks. Okay. So Mid Oaks as a brand has no idea their customer base, because as soon as they distributed those bottles, right, they had no idea who's ever heard of their brand, right?
Right.
But if that is tracked as an NFT and that bottle goes with everybody who has bought that bottle from you with the NFT, they now have a collection of wallet addresses that they know have purchased a bottle. And let's just say you sell it to a friend, they sell it to a friend, they give it to a friend. That's, 4 or 5 people, right? They, as the bottler, have no idea how to reach those 4 or 5 people, right? That's heard of their brand, that's interested in it. But now they do, if there's an NFT attached, because there's 5 wallet addresses. And they could easily send an NFT to each one of those 5 wallet addresses and say, hey, you're a customer, you've actually transacted in one of my products. Here's a special offer that's coming up, and I only wanted to give it to the people who know our brand. Now there's a way to do that. That wasn't possible in the past. Everybody like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Louis Vuitton has no idea who has heard of their brand or bought a handbag, right? But now they have the digital receipt. If they use that system, they do.
Yep.
And there's a way to interact with every single one of your customers now.
Yes, and it is every single one of them, because if you tie an NFT to it and it transfers with the actual physical ownership, like, the ability to track customer data in the secondary market is much, much, much higher, and it's valuable. And I think so. The really, really big winners over the next 5 to 10 years in terms of like physical product delivery brands are going to be the people who embrace Web3 and understand Web3 isn't about crypto. It never has been, right? Like it's been attractive for the people who got in here because you can make money, right? And it's crazy and there's insane opportunities, right? But it's the ability to track and reward a consumer at a very, very, very high level.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's the same way e-commerce wasn't about kind of the bits and data packets on the internet and web pages. It was about the interaction between the customer and the service provider, right?
And it's kind of funny how it's funny to me how the ability the ability to track in Web 2 is becoming more and more difficult because of privacy laws, right? Everybody's like, I don't want to, I don't want to be tracked. Apple with their App Store, ask this, give permission to track, my app usage, right? And use my information. It's like being so restricted, but all of us in Web3 now are like, we want privacy, but we don't understand, and like a lot of people don't understand, I think it's funny, is Web3 tracks you more so than anything in Web2 ever. Right? Because it's an on-chain ledger of transactions that are happening. And
but it's also anonymity. It's anonymity because I have 30 wallet addresses, right? Track one of mine. I don't care. Because the one that I really use, I don't. So it's almost like, it's the best of both worlds, right? Like you get to keep that anonymity, and it actually allows that privacy, like potential to be in the hands of the end user, right? It's effectively being able to log on the internet, and you're like, collect all the cookies you want, but I'm just going to create a new identity,
Right. It's similar to how I structure my emails, right? So like I have an email that I have all my digital receipts for, right? Every purchase online, all of that from every company goes to one email, right? Whether it's clothing or, my rent or my water bill or whatever it is, it all goes to that one email. But if I'm just trying to shop a deal online and I get an offer for a discount from a brand and I don't know if I'm really going to purchase, but it might convince me, I have my spam email. I'll give you my spam email. I'll give everybody my spam email. I don't give a fuck. You can have my spam email. It's adam.andrews1997@yahoo.com. That's my fucking spam email. It probably has 150,000 emails in it. I will not ever open that email. It's just similar to a wallet. Like you could give them some fucking random wallet address and they would never know if you're actually a customer or not. But with on-chain data, if you actually hold an NFT version of, let's say, this hat, I know you own it, right? Unless it got stolen or something, right? You still own this hat. Maybe you might be interested in owning a hat similar to it in the future. Or maybe you might be interested in our next whiskey drop because I know, hey, here's a whitelist spot. Here's some alpha for blockchain bottles. If you hold the first NFT, you'll get whitelist for the second drop.
Yeah, exactly.
Holy shit. And now you just gave back the ability to make money to the consumer.
Brands kind of do that, right? Like Rolex kind of has that list, right? Like where they're going, hey, we're going to come up with watches, and then like you effectively have to own one of their previous Rolexes to be on the list, right? And when I kind of
Ferrari
mentioned
does the same thing.
And the Louis V bag. Like if there was some bag that had an NFT attached to every one, and that was public knowledge, and you Louis V put that, like, here's our first NFT backed handbag, right? You kind of solved the issue of like authenticity too, because anytime that's transacted, people are like, yo, that was the Louis V NFT one, right? Like, so you're going to say that bag that you give me, like, is the authentic one? Well, where's the NFT to it? Because if I don't have the NFT to it, it's probably fake or it's stolen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, the facet for authenticity and like how to do that, like how do you actually do that, right? Because now the only way to verify it is to have somebody who knows something about it verify it, right?
Yeah, you send it back in,
Yeah, exactly. Or get it verified from the company, right? Which is essentially just sending it to somebody for verification. The how do you do that, right? QR codes, very simple way to do it. And that QR code opens the transaction on the blockchain and it shows who owns this NFT and where the wallet is. And then before you ever purchase the bag, that person has to send you the NFT. Boom.
Yeah.
Scams avoided completely.
Yeah.
Because they cannot recreate an on-chain asset. You can duplicate it as many times as you want,
right,
and write a fake smart contract and copy and paste. Like, you can do that, but it's not connected to that transaction on the blockchain.
Yep.
Very simple. So you just look up, now you have a Craigslist, you just look up on, Web3 Craigslist, Louis Vuitton bag ID number, and it's the transaction ID, and you look it up and it shows there, and you're like, okay, there's the real version of this. Transfer me that NFT, and I'll believe that this bag is the real version.
Yep. I pay for it, right? Like, I straight up just pay for it.
Yep.
No, don't do cash. It's an NFT bag. Pay me by crypto, and that's the way you make sure it's the real thing.
Yeah, and I feel like there's going to be a big market for escrow companies, NFT escrow companies, very similar to real estate, right? You go into a contract, money's in escrow until something happens on the other end for the other party, right? And so to kind of tie this all back full circle and wrap this podcast up, it's like the ability to use Web3 and blockchain technology in the real estate sector is absolutely astronomically high in terms of what it can actually be used for, right?
Yeah.
And that goes for every industry, but we're specifically talking, blockchain tech and real estate, as well as, NFTs. And it's super powerful. I'm excited to see what you guys do with it over the next couple years and beyond. I myself am interested in getting into real estate and looking at getting into syndicates, and it's essentially what you're doing, right? Pooling assets to purchase a property, and it's fractionalized ownership, except the syndicate that I'm going to get into it's not on chain, right? But
hey, if there's a property that like you're interested in, let's just do it. Crowdfund it, right?
Okay. Like, if you think that will work, like I know it will work. You just have to be able to market it, right, and not lose the property. So, exactly. if we can get a property under contract and do it, I'm super down to do that. Especially if we can crowdfund, 100% of the funding. If you can come in and crowdfund 100% of the funding and not have to get a loan, that's insane. Like, there's not a whole lot of people that can do that, and then you really, really start building your value and your net worth fast doing that, right?
Yeah, and
even for the end user, even if you only put in $5,000, the legal part of that is the hard part, but it can be done. It can be done for sure.
Yeah, on the legal side, there's a lot of companies that are like figured it out. They create an LLC. They say the members of the LLC are the owners of these, NFTs, and they hear the wallet addresses. And if you kind of think about, where interest rates are and like real estate values, like that, there's going to be more of a need for this. Because interest rates go up, it's harder to get funding for it. And in reality, like, it's already being done. When you buy a house and you get a loan for 80%, the bank lends it, but then the owners of the bank are the shareholders of the bank, who are regular people. If it's not the shareholders, it's some private equity fund. Either way, it's being crowdfunded by a bunch of people. Yes. And this is just a way to make it more efficient and, 100%. Kind of skip over a lot of that.
And add trust,
And add trust.
And add trust. That's a huge one, right? Because a lot of these people don't trust the banks anymore, and for good reason. They fucked up really, really big, in 08, 07, 08. And I mean, it's happening in China right now. Their real estate market is fucked. It's not looking good. And I'm really interested to see what happens in the long run with real estate and NFTs. And, to really just wrap this up, I don't think, like, dude, I could talk to you for, the next couple hours, just specifically about this stuff, because it's so intriguing. I know you have to go. So we'll just wrap it up and with an invite back to the podcast. So feel free to come back in the future. Maybe even when you have a property, hey, let's use this avenue of the podcast to market the property that you have the ability to purchase. And, let's do that. And I'll stay in contact with you. If I find a property, I have a lot of friends in real estate. There's one closing on the 31st of this month. And, it's a little late for that, but they do a lot of deals. So I'll speak with them and we'll get in touch and we'll see what we can do. Because I think this would be really, really cool to do, and at the forefront of technology, and like a cool thing to say that you were a part of. One of the first.
I love that.
Blockchain syndicates.
And you being kind of the owner of that, if you find that property, like I think that's awesome. Right. And I think for like your audience, right? Like it's not real until it's done, and like if we go through a process and we explain it, like man. The hardest time was the first time, and then afterwards,
exactly. So, dude, I like to give 60 seconds to 2 minutes at the end of every episode to just let you guys shill. Any of my guests, hey, tell my users how they can get in touch with you. Tell the listeners, just give them your spiel.
Yeah. So they get in touch. Go on our website. It's fractalprop.com. And I kind of have a little bit of a vision, like 10 years from now, like any person is going to be able to look up like house or apartment or home or stay for the night and be able to get like 1,000 dots pop up on Google Maps with a price that they can basically stay that night at. And that's possible if you have the ability to give the owners of those properties a way to create a listing for their property. And like, I think it's completely possible with the technology we have now. It's just an education process. And really, it's probably a simplification process. And so like, we're working on that, and we're always looking for like-minded individuals that like want to work on something. So it's like almost an open invite to all your listeners. Like if you're interested and you want to do something, like just reach out to us. Like we'll get it done.
That's awesome. I love that. Dude, love the vision. Loved the conversation. Super happy to have gotten an email about you wanting to come on the pod. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights. And just thanks for coming on. Everybody who's listening, all of S's information about himself as Fractal Prop are going to be in the podcast show notes and or YouTube description below. If you're watching this on social media, you'll have to click through and go to the podcast show notes to find out more about S and what he's doing. So with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in. I really, really appreciate it. Without you, we wouldn't grow. Without you, Web3 wouldn't grow. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you for tuning in. If you could drop a like, drop a comment, leave a review, let me know how you thought this episode went. If you learned something, share it with somebody, because that's the way we grow, and that's something we were just talking about. So with that being said, I am going to wrap up today's episode. Thank you so much for coming on, S, and we are done.